Welcome to Metro STL. I'm your host, Antonio French. We start today with the fourth and final part of our Benign Neglect series, which examines the history of decline in North St. Louis. In the final installment of the series, we take a look at the future of North St. Louis. After decades of benign neglect, followed by devastating and controversial practices from Paul McKee, will North St. Louis residents see their neighborhood come back, and will they have a place in any such transformation? Our George Sales takes a look.
North St. Louis sits at a crossroads. The largest construction project in St. Louis history is taking shape, but some would argue it comes as a result of half a century of benign neglect. After all, these 97 acres became available for development in many cases because people left, homes crumbled, and were eventually cleared. Something else is also gone from here besides the houses.
There are a lot of obstacles, money being the biggest one, but also the deep suspicion of the remaining residents in terms of what's happened to them over the course of their and their parents' lives.
And in the end, trust, or lack of it, may be the biggest barrier to solutions. Are people in these neighborhoods going to trust anyone after what they've seen happen here? For starters, should they trust Paul McKee? Some believe there's little choice.
The way that I see it is nobody has created a North Side development plan in as long as I've been alive. I've never seen it. Nobody knows about it. The only plan we know about is the Team 4 plan, which outlined detriment and depletion for our neighborhoods. There was never a plan that we've ever seen that anybody has spent the time putting together that can give you an idea of what it looks like to have some substantial investment in the North Side of St. Louis. And whether Paul McKee's done it or not, at least can see a plan from the man.
However, some of McKee's plans may have changed. This small construction site a few blocks from the new NGA location is on some of the property Paul McKee assembled. But he is not the developer. It's a company called Net Zero, looking to build extremely energy-efficient houses in this section of St. Louis Place. Their only dealings with Paul McKee involve buying his land for the project.
In the sense that he owns all of the, a vast majority of the land in this area, yes, and he has the desire to develop this.
Their goal of developing Montgomery Street near 20th really addresses two keys of the North Side's future. They're both utilizing Paul McKee-owned property and spinning off the big NGA project. They would not be here without it.
I mean, it's crucial, right? That's a multi-billion-dollar facility that's going in, and all of the jobs and everything that it's creating. It's allowing us this opportunity to, go forward with this development that's been much needed. And
how much the NGA involves itself in interacting with its neighbors could be the determining factor in whether or not it's the transformational project city leaders are insisting it will be.
What I hope, and I do not know the answer one way or the other, is that NGA itself, or whatever GSA rumors, is actually an active participant in neighborhood revitalization. Wash U, for example, took over, and SLU for that matter at the current time, is interested in their surroundings. Ralston was the same way, etc. Because if they improve the neighborhood around them, it's safer for their employees and customers. It's cleaner, you can stay there, people feel comfortable, and by the way, you've done good by doing well in the neighborhoods.
But will it be that or a giant walled-off government facility, a neighbor in geography only? The Net Zero developers say they're betting with real dollars that won't happen.
I don't see a big government thing with a wall. While it will be secure and it will be what it's intended to be, I think it's also going to be, a point, an epicenter to start that growth, right? When we start building these houses that we're doing here, these zero energy, highly efficient homes, and start to create a new feeling for a neighborhood, we fully expect that to catch on and start to bring in different aspects like the Grove is doing and different areas in the city that are, seeing that transformation and really getting a diverse crowd and enjoying all of the perks of being in the city.
That sort of redevelopment is what city leaders hope will make the NGA investment pay off. The initial numbers, up to $45 million in city tax credits over the next 30 years, combined with $95 million in state credits, hardly seem in balance with the mere $14 million NGA's website says they chipped in. Critics of the deal, like Percy Green, point back at city government.
They'll dance with the devil for for all practical purposes in order to try to get reelected, and in so doing, they're selling out the community.
And what about the places miles from downtown? Places like the Wells Goodfellow neighborhood. That's where a lot of the demolition is happening. We told you earlier about Twitter co-founder Jack Dorsey's investment in tearing down some of the area's most dilapidated buildings. He and partner Bill Pulte call it the St. Louis Blight Authority. We asked Dorsey back in July, who grew up in the city, if it's hard to stomach watching so much being razed in the name of progress.
I think it's, it's not just this moment. I mean, this is just a start. And while it looks like destruction right now, this clears the way for construction. And that's what I'm excited to see. So I don't put too much into this one moment because we have to come back and see how we follow through.
It was kind of a systematic thing going back to the 60s that sort of allowed this to happen in North St. Louis. Do you feel like you're kind of starting to right a wrong here a little bit?
I'm focused on the present and what we can do. And in the present, we know we need to clean the slate and provide an opportunity for people to build.
Dorsey is actually bringing about some hope in the skeptics.
I've had mixed feelings about it. I would like to think that Dorsey is operating in the best interest of the community. I would like to think that with him being born during these times, hopefully that he had the type of experience that is far different in terms of righteousness than what his parents might have been subjected to.
But will Dorsey follow through? Will the latest version of city government follow through? That's what remains to be seen. The decades-long track record clearly isn't so great.
I see the same kind of impulse is still there, that it's a lot easier to start over, to clean things out. And I don't think it's necessarily always racist or anti-humanitarian thinking, because you look at these neighborhoods and they do have huge challenges, and the city government's ability to solve them might look very, very small, which is, I think, why we need new leadership at the helm of city government. Maybe somebody even like Jack Dorsey could play a role in that on a different level, because bringing Jack Dorsey in to demolish your house is like a very tiny Band-Aid, on a body that's fighting a disease. Having Jack Dorsey as mayor or an advisor to the mayor, you might start thinking of real strategies.
Among them, finding the ways to provide the sort of support the Team 4 plan recommended rationing all those years ago. That, nearly everyone agrees, will help bolster investment.
The reason that doesn't happen on any meaningful scale is that no one is stepping up to say, yeah, if the population increases, we'll provide the schools, we will provide the police, and we will provide the basic services that neighborhoods expect.
And finally, many believe it's time to break from Team 4's habits and start focusing major resources in these places many in the region couldn't find on a map.
So why are we using public resources in whatever forms to support more development in the Central West End, maybe around Cortex, the WashU Medical Center, maybe even right here in Midtown and parts of the SLU area? They've become, in my mind, places that are self-sustaining. We've made those investments, probably overmade them at this point in healthy areas. We need to go to the next neighborhoods out, if you will, and build those up so they build strength that can help move further north.
In some spots, it's already happening, maybe a block at a time, and it's these areas of small development that nurture the belief that momentum can be achieved. Benign neglect left to the pages of history.
Joining me now is MetroSTL.com managing editor George Sales. George, great piece again. This series actually has been pretty fascinating. In the conclusion, you take a look at if there is actually any hope for North St. Louis. And what is the consensus?
I mean, the consensus is there's got to be. I think I sense a stubborn optimism, if you will. And you're part of that. You're running businesses in North St. Louis. You know what it's like wanting to go toward a vision and to see a vision. And there are people who do see that vision. There are politicians who see that vision. There are the developers working on that apartment complex. And that'll be apartment complex and housing. They want some of that to be affordable housing, by the way, and they're working toward doing that. They see that vision. And so you have, again, what I would call a stubborn optimism that things can make a turn. A lot of people feel that the NGA project will have some positive effects. Obviously, there's been a lot of controversy around it. There are a lot of people who don't like it, but it's kind of the hand that folks are dealt at this point, and there is a belief among some that there is a way to capitalize there. And then the other thing that I think gets pointed out by a lot of the experts, so to speak, is basic economics. You can go to North St. Louis now and you can purchase a house in some areas for a much lower cost than you can purchase that same piece of property in a lot of other places.
Yeah, just about any other place.
Yeah, and at some point, that sheer economic draw would seem likely to draw more people in. Now, how does that work? Hard to say, but more than one person made that point.
Yeah, I think what is often forgotten or not talked about in this discussion, as you mentioned, prices are very low in those areas, and so what we don't have is demand. We haven't seen the demand to go over in those areas. If anybody was interested in buying a house, they could buy them so cheap and rehab it. As a Northside resident, one of the things that I find most frustrating is that there does not seem to be a strategic plan for what the city plans to do with this area, and surely not one that involves the people who live there now. And so that's frustrating. Have you seen any signs in your investigations and interviews during this series of any indication that the city is trying to put together a whole plan for how to redevelop the northern half of the city?
I think I see it more right now as a cobbling together of projects. Obviously, the big thing is NGA, and everything in North St. Louis for the next several years will, in some way or another, spin out of that. I think that if you talk to most city leaders, they would argue that that's the plan. A multi-billion-dollar project in the heart of North St. Louis, to the north of downtown, to be the thing that bolsters all other things.
Yeah.
If that happens or not, that remains to be seen. And obviously, a lot of people question whether that can work, but that seems to be what they're, the horse they're hitching themselves
Well,
to.
North St. Louis is a lot bigger than that area around NGA, and it's still not clear how the NGA project will involve or affect any residents that live around that area.
And that's the big question, and that's the one that we're going to, as we go forward here, there are next steps in covering a story like this. This doesn't just end with the fourth part of this series. And the next question I intend to be asking is of the folks who are running NGA. What is that going to be? Is it going to be a fenced-off government facility where people get in their cars at the end of the day and drive back to the county? Or is it going to be something that interacts with its surroundings? Is it going to be something that encourages its workers to patronize businesses nearby and that sort of thing?
Yeah, that still remains to be seen. But I'm sure in the pages of the Northsider newspaper every Thursday and on MetroSTL.com, we will continue to cover this topic.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you very much. Next, we dive into the city's search for the next top fashion designer. In a local competition styled after popular Project Runway show, Fashion Anarchy gives St. Louis designers the chance to compete for a coveted place on the runway.
In this historic building on Washington Avenue, they're attempting to revive a little history. To those inside, the startup world is about much more than tech. The St. Louis Fashion Fund is working to revive an industry they believe should be top of mind and top of the line in the Gateway City.
If you look at the history of St. Louis and that the garment district used to be a very vibrant part of St. Louis, the history of the garment district and fashion in St. Louis is as much as our history is baseball and beer.
And they're going to great lengths to seek out top talent. Remember the show Project Runway?
Time is up.
Throughout the summer and fall, they've been doing a version here in St. Louis looking for the area's top young designer. They call it Fashion Anarchy. It feels like it.
It is pretty much the same thing. It is the same, it's 48-hour competition, it's donated fabrics, they don't know what they're creating until they get in the space, and then it's go for it.
Is it stressful?
It's very stressful, yeah.
No eating, no sleeping, nothing but sewing, no.
A visit during day one found two of the competitors bustling. Anna Heinhold, who works in a bridal shop, was having a bit of culture shock.
So I'm used to sewing, making everything perfect, taking your time, taking as long as you need to make it exactly how it needs to be. But for this, there's not enough time for that. So you just kind of got to do it as quickly as you can and hope that it's good enough for the runway.
And Amanda Casares, who works as a designer and...
I'm also a bartender, so I'm a vampire.
She was sinking her teeth into a project with goals mirroring those of the Fashion Fund itself. Get traction, get noticed, and grow.
I have a studio at home, but it would definitely be nice to have a studio outside, especially downtown with a storefront, which would allow me to, for customers to have more access to what it is that I do and start making some real money out of, the line.
24 hours later, with contestant Tronda Edwards also pushing toward the finish line, all are running out of time. The evening's party is setting up downstairs. Quite a time for Amanda to make a change.
I did decide around 4 o'clock that I wanted to make a t-shirt to go underneath it, so we had to make that today, right before.
Just a couple of hours later, the designers are suddenly on display themselves and taking a breath.
Crazy, very crazy. The last 2 hours was like crunch time. I thought I was gonna be good. I was like, okay, but last 2 hours was like, I gotta pick up the pace. It doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be done.
I keep looking over my phone every 2 minutes. What time is it now? What time is it now? What time is it now? You tend to make a lot more mistakes, or you tend to, get really jittery because you don't have as much time. So I was just trying to stay calm.
A crowd has filled the room, all looking at the final designs that were just rolls of fabric a couple of days earlier. The eyeballs are the key here because you never know who's looking.
I mean, the Fashion Fund is a place where you can make anything happen. Dreams come true. Seriously, not to be cliche, but the people that walk through these doors are people that are in very important positions in the industry in New York, to kids who live in the city, to aspiring designers.
There are questions from the judges about the City Museum/Garment District theme.
And then when the City Museum got introduced, I was like, and she was inspired by the City Museum. So it just flew like that.
Then a result.
And the winner of Fashion Anarchy Garment District President goes to Amanda.
For Amanda Casares, it's a win and a step, one the Fashion Fund plans to help others follow.
People get tripped up and think fashion is on the East Coast and West Coast. There's fashion everywhere. And I think it's up to us to push the St. Louis designers out there and give them more of a national presence.
George Sells, MetroSTL.com.
Joining me now is Audra Harold, a program manager from the St. Louis Fashion Fund. Thanks for joining us, Audra.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is a great event that you're having. What year is this for this?
For Fashion Anarchy,
yeah.
This is our first year.
Is this going to be an annual thing?
It is. It is.
Right.
Yeah.
And how many participants did you have this year?
So we have 3 participants per segment, and this is the 3rd one. So we'll have 3 designers that will be competing.
Tell us a little bit about why the Fashion Fund exists here in St. Louis.
Yeah, we're revitalizing the fashion industry here in St. Louis. As you may be aware, the fashion industry in St. Louis in the past was vibrant. It was second to New York City, and then it went away. Due to manufacturing and a lot leaving the city, and that's all coming back. So the St. Louis Fashion Fund is vital in making that come back.
So you have an event coming up in November too, right?
That's correct. November the 9th at the Last Hotel is our grand finale, where we'll have each of the winners from each of the series compete against each other. And that will be held, like I said, at the Last Hotel.
Okay.
They're one of our partners, and they're been pivotal in making a lot of this happen. So.
All right. Well, we'll be looking forward to that event.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Lastly, we take a look at a mother's protest against gun violence here in St. Louis. After losing 2 of her children to violence, Ramona White is using her voice to make a difference in her community. This year, she hosted the 4th annual Malik White Basketball Showdown in loving memory of both her son and daughter.
You know the saying, a mother's job is never done. For Ramona Fortner, this truth has become a reality.
The reason that I hold this event every year, because one, it's needed, and the second biggest thing, was that I had 2 children that were murdered. And my son was Malik White. He was the only child, the only male child that I had. And he was murdered in 2002 by a preacher's son under mistaken identity. And this is Malik, if you can see, for 1 second. That's my baby, my only son, born, came in at a whopping 11 pounds, 12 and a half ounces, and 26 inches long, natural birth.
Malik White's love was basketball, and his still grieving mother's protest against gun violence is to bring people together to share that love. But for Ramona White, the grieving doesn't end with her dead son. Her daughter, Robin Fortner, was murdered 5 years after Malik.
And this is Robin. And my voice changed when I talk about Robin, because Robin was my first baby. She was murdered in 2007, and they were 5 years apart. And she was so protective over her sisters and brothers, and I miss my kids like any other mother would, you know what I'm saying? And each one of them have a special meaning in life.
On a mission to uplift her community, Mama White, as her loved ones call her, does this every year.
I never thought anything like this would happen to me. I didn't know that the world could be so evil. So this is why I do the annual event every year, to show people what God has done for me. And that even at your weakest moment, you will have strength. And there is a such thing as the light at the end of the tunnel.
Now, Mama White has dedicated her life to honor her children's memory.
It's always a pleasure to be in the presence of people who's trying to uplift the community, to inspire the community, to point a different pathway for our youth, as from a negativity to a positiveness. So also I support the mother's remembrance of her son by uplifting other young people.
I was presented today with this. This means a lot to me. It's from the Board of Aldermen here in St. Louis, Missouri. As I open up, you know, it's a resolution. Now, most people don't know what a resolution is, but it states in the next 10 to 20 generations, when they open up the book, they'll know that these people existed and what happened to them. And we'll bring still change to it. And my older woman, Kara Spencer, God bless her heart, it's been 17 years since Malik was murdered and 12 years for Robin. So this is like a huge thing to give to a mother who has been out here fighting for equality.
Joining me now is Bria Grimion from the North Sider newspaper. Hi, Bria.
Hi.
Yeah, so you covered this event and you spoke to Ms. White.
I did.
I can only imagine the loss of 2 children and how that could affect her. She's worked hard to keep the names of her children in the public's memory and to try to prevent this from happening to other people. What was it like to sit down and talk to her?
It was very eye-opening. She was emotional, but she was strong at the same time, because she wanted, the community to know that, the violence needs to stop, but she also wanted to bring everyone together to celebrate and to love on each other.
Yeah, it's a very timely message considering the violence that's been going on in the city right now. Was this event well attended, and what was the general mood of folks who were there? It
was very well attended. It was a packed gym. I think the overall mood was joy. And I say that because I think everyone was excited and grateful to just be able to celebrate each other and to be in the presence of each other.
Yeah, well, thank goodness for people like Ms. White.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Well, that's our show for today. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube page and like and share our videos on Facebook. Please check MetroSTL.com every day for new stories and videos. Until next time, I'm Antonio French. Thanks for watching.